Well, we've learned some things about the human aspect of this travel ban, or Donald Trump would say, whatever you want to call it.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
It's not a Muslim ban, it's not a travel ban, it's ban roll-on. I'm not exactly sure what it is, to be honest with you. It's kind of difficult to figure out what the Trump administration is saying from 1 hour to the next about what happened this past weekend. We have local reaction to the concept of perhaps a Muslim ban, or I guess this action that the U.S. government is now taking with refugees and actually people with visas now, we're learning, not being able to arrive here on American soil. It's fascinating and it's horrifying in some ways. And I know a lot of you out there say, well, that's what we elected them for. Well, you know, as we continue to talk about some of the human stories about this, I'm going to ask you the question here and on WPRO weekdays 3 to 6, is that really what you want him to do, and is that really what you elected him for? Again, I will say to you, if those of you out there who feel strongly about this, feel like you've got no voice on this program, just let us know here at Dan York State of Mind. We have a seat for you. I hope you're having a pleasant week. Let us go to the rundown real quick and just cover a couple of the issues that are dominating the headlines. Obviously, the Supreme Court choice is a big one, right? All the pomp and circumstance going on with the primetime announcement of Neil Gorsuch for the Supreme Court. And we have the latest from CBS.
Vice President Mike Pence escorted Judge Neil Gorsuch to Capitol Hill for a meeting with Senate leader Mitch McConnell.
We're all thrilled and looking forward to getting the confirmation process started.
President Trump named the 49-year-old as his nominee to fill the late Antonin Scalia's seat on the Supreme Court.
I promise to select someone who respects our laws and is representative of our Constitution and who loves our Constitution.
The legal community considers Gorsuch a staunch conservative whose views closely mirror those of Justice Scalia.
It is the role of judges to apply, not alter, the work of the people's representatives.
Republicans are calling the nominee impressive, respected, and a consistent conservative. But Judge Gorsuch's path to confirmation won't be easy. Democratic senators are already lining up in opposition to him.
I have very deep, serious concerns as to whether he is in the mainstream.
Democrats point to Judge Gorsuch's record on women's health care, worker rights, and privacy rights as being outside of the mainstream, the most important criteria for Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. He issued a statement after Gorsuch was named, saying he has very serious doubts about Judge Gorsuch's ability to meet this standard. Gorsuch will need to win over some Democrats to get 60 votes needed to gain confirmation.
You know, one of the things I think you got to be wary of here is getting too excited about this. I know Donald Trump presents this kind of almost enigmatic type of presidency, but this is normal. Anytime we have a nomination to the Supreme Court, there's a yes side and a no side and a fight that ensues. What's not normal is what Donald Trump is calling for here. Here's the headline from the Associated Press tweet. Trump is telling the leadership, Mitch McConnell et al., to go nuclear. Now, don't fret if you don't know anything about government and politics. That's not the push of a button and missiles going off. That is the Senate majority deciding that it only will require 51 votes to approve the nominee, not the 60 traditional votes. Now, there's filibuster threats from the Democrats, and they've got to watch how they're doing this thing, too, because for the most part, Americans respect the idea that we elect a president for primarily nominees to the Supreme Court. So that could backfire if they act out ridiculously. At the same time, if the Republicans go nuclear, meaning they drop it down to 51, change the rules, that's something that will set as precedent for a Supreme Court choice and come back to haunt you. Because guess what? The cycle flips and Democrats will be in the White House again. You can count on that. All right, so that'll be interesting to follow. In the meantime, this is really fascinating. So last night, Professor Jim Green, was here. He's a Brown University guy, and he was telling us how much he was finding problems with the latest move at the airports and, of course, with the 7 countries targeted by the Trump administration. And he was saying that there were some real implications here at home, even at Brown. Listen in.
It's very harmful in many ways. It's harmful for academic freedom in this country, the ability for scholars from other countries who have were citizens of Iran or Iraq who might be here in the United States is being prevented from this temporary ban. We have a school year in session. There are people who cannot come back and teach classes or take classes because of this ban, with no basis of this.
How many faculty are affected, do you know?
I've been asked not to mention the details because we're dealing with very sensitive situations, and hopefully we're going to be able to get some of the people to come in. There's disputes about who really is a part of the ban and who's not a part of the ban.
Interesting that it was only, moments after the recording of our television show and during our radio program yesterday that Lexi Chris, our outstanding producer, found this news that first came out of the Boston papers and then the Associated Press nationwide. Syrian doctor studying in U.S. stuck abroad due to travel ban. And we said, hey, we know that guy. That is Dr. Khalid Amalaji. Take two. Amalaji. He has been a guest on this program. He is involved in a Brown Initiative project which shares expertise from various countries, doctors, who come and talk about their triage efforts. This man is a Syrian citizen. He is a native of Aleppo. He's in Turkey right now, and what happened is he comes here to study for one semester. He's got 3 more. During the holidays, he scoots back overseas to take care of some business, leaves his wife, who's also a doctor and who is now pregnant with their child, here. He ends up over there and is in Turkey stuck because A, his visa was revoked during the time between the president's election and his inauguration. Unbeknownst and not getting any coverage is that visas have been denied. Active visas have been squelched. So he was in the middle of trying to get his visa fixed when he learned that, guess what? It's all for naught because no Syrians are coming back, period, for at least a period of 90 days. I talked with him direct from Turkey on the radio yesterday.
Unfortunately, now she's there, I'm here, we are lost. We cannot take like a direct decision that should we wait till I get a new visa, or should she like come back here, or what? So it's a little bit of a dilemma.
I would think that officials in this region would catch this story and make it a talking point, a real-life conversation for what's happening with Donald Trump's plans right now. Interesting, huh? In the meantime, here's a CNN headline that kind of reflects on all that is going on here with this travel ban, because we're not exactly sure what to call it. It doesn't mean it's kind of like the old, it doesn't have to call me Johnson, that old bad joke from decades ago. Just decades ago. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It is good to see you. This is a return visit. Omar has got a life story that is incredible. Check foxprovidence.com for the story from the last time, because I don't think we got all the time in the world. A journalist and runs a very important refugee program here in the state. And Imam Farid Ansari is an often guest and a friend of the program who tries at least to reflect on what's going on with the Muslim American community here in town. Before we get to your reflection on what to call this thing, do you have any reflection on that story from the Syrian doctor? I mean, you're working with refugees and people going back and forth all the time.
Well, I'm happy you highlighted that story, because I think it also explains what is happening currently. It's not a refugee ban alone. It's not only a Muslim ban. It is a complete immigration ban in these countries. So for immigration ban, it's 90 days for all the 7 countries. Libya, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, Sudan. Iran, and Sudan. And then for refugees, it's 4 months, more than 90 days, 120 days. And then after that, for Syrians, it's indefinite. They are not coming unless he changes his mind, and what changes Trump's mind. So basically, this is what we're going through. It's not only Muslim ban or refugee ban, it's total ban from those countries.
Yeah, and I guess some people watching would say, oh, well, you've got to affect change. There's always some, peripheral damage that goes along with it, right?
Well, I suppose that's one way of looking at it. Personally, I don't like the terminology of Muslim ban, because that obviously sends a message to the Islamic community and the Islamic world that it's our right as citizens, Muslim American citizens, to practice our religion is in violation of the Constitution.
You mean that the term will actually take on different meaning in different contexts?
Yeah, exactly. And the perception, the way that the public is seeing that is if there's something wrong with Islam. And that's been perpetuated, I think, in terms of the perception as far as the Muslims in general, Islam in general, being demonized once again. And really it's unfair, it's un-American. You want to make America great again? Well, let's enforce the Constitution.
Well, you know, one of the things that might be to your benefit is and how ironic and paradoxical and sick is this thought. The doctor's story really is away from the Muslim thing. I mean, I'm guessing he is Muslim from Syria. My guess is he is. But he's just a Syrian citizen. This guy is doing God's work in Aleppo, offering his expertise here in America. I mean, you've got to go to foxprovidence.com and see that show. We'll let you know what date it was during the December 19th. Okay, thanks, Lex. You should see the effusive relationship between the brown doctor and this guy as they're sharing expertise and game-saving stuff, which has nothing to do with anything of this politics thing.
And there are many, many, many professional Muslims, doctors, dentists, others that are doing an enormous service to our state and our country. In terms of, I can think of another professor out at URI. I think he's Yemenis, but he's a pathologist. He's a very prominent member of their faculty. Now, what if he were to go back to his country on a visit to some of his relatives? He wouldn't be back. He wouldn't be allowed to come back to perform his duties at URI.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about what to do if there's anything that can be done here. Stay with us. Someone asked the question, what do you do? Well, it's the politics of this thing, of course, and attorneys general, that's the correct way to say it, by the way, across the country are starting to push back, and even our own. And Peter Kilmartin, who's on a milk carton generally, missing in action, actually has spoken up on this. Here's the latest.
The Judiciary Committee is considering moving forward to make Senator Jeff Sessions the next Attorney General.
He will follow the law.
That's something the previous acting AG, Sally Yates, says she was doing by refusing to enforce President Trump's travel ban for citizens from 7 countries. Trump fired Yates Monday night.
And she really is about justice. And her firing tells me that the Trump administration has doubled down on not adhering to justice and the rule of law.
Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Kilmartin told Eyewitness News that he has been in contact with his colleagues across the nation since the executive order was signed, and now since Yates' firing.
Right now, those who act in the federal government are getting fired for acting. Well, President Trump can't fire the Attorney General for the state of Rhode Island or any other state, so we will act.
All working together to reject this discriminatory and dangerous measure.
Massachusetts AG Maura Healey revealed Tuesday she's taking action in the courts.
My office is filing suit to challenge the executive order.
Kilmartin says he's reviewing this suit along with one out of Washington state.
If we find that we can have some standing, we will join in.
So that's a fascinating reaction. Politics of this thing are fascinating, don't you think?
Amazingly fascinating. Actually, you may correct me, Imam, but I think this is more of an ideology that is based on wrong assumptions, because most American Muslims are African Americans. They are not even Middle Easterns. Most of the Muslims in America. So it's just some sort of idea that's thrown out there. Muslims are Middle Easterns, and Middle Easterns are terrorists. I mean, where's Saudi Arabia on the list, and the Qatar or the Gulf states. So I think this is just
that is true that most Muslims in America are African American.
Yeah. And they're. I mean, this goes back.
Present company included.
Exactly. I mean, it goes back to the 30s. Islam has been growing steadily, particularly among the African American community, and there are literally millions of African Americans who are Muslims.
Why?
Who have nothing to do with immigration.
Right. Get that. Exactly. No. Get that for sure. Why the growth?
Well, because of the movement of the Nation of Islam early on. That was the primary cause.
That shook a lot of people up, though.
It did because of the racialization that the Elijah Muhammad had sort of included in it. However, it wasn't he that introduced these ideas, it was his teacher. You know, when he came, allegedly, there's different places where he's purportedly to have come from, but nevertheless, after 1975, a lot of that philosophy and that theology that he spoke of, his son replaced that with the mainstream Islam. So you have the majority of the Muslims here in America that have transitioned from that experience into following the mainstream.
We don't hear much about Louis Farrakhan anymore these days.
No, well, that's, in a way, it's a good thing.
It wasn't a great billboard for you, is what you're saying.
Well, I actually know Minister Farrakhan. You know, I'm originally from New York. I knew him for 11 years during that period of my own life where I was a member of the Nation of Islam. But yet, when Elijah Muhammad's son came and introduced the mainstream Islam, what Islam really is about, he eradicated a lot of the racialized concepts that his father spoke of.
Well, I'm glad you made that point. So, what are people here supposed to think? I mean, you shouldn't instruct people on how to think, but the Dream Center and the things that you guys are working on and the refugee environment and the number of Syrians we already have here, a couple hundred new came here in the last year or so, and we haven't heard a peep about problems with that. How are we supposed to process all of this in your mind?
I mean, it's extreme trauma, and people are just overwhelmed with. People don't even know how to react here. When people flee wars, they are separated with their loved ones, because some are wounded, some are lost while they're trying to escape, and in most instances when people arrive here, they have loved ones, husbands, wives, spouses, and children left out there.
And so it could be a year to two process.
A year to two, very tough vetting process.
Yeah. Right.
It's harder to enter here through the refugee process than any other way.
And we have to be careful not to confuse this particular traumatic moment in our history with the Mexican border conversation. They're very They're very different conversations.
Yes, very different, because a refugee resettlement, the U.S. government comes in and says we are helping, we are doing something. For instance, we destroyed Iraq. We are helping at least some of their members to rebuild life for them. It's like a moral commitment to help people that we feel we are indebted to. But others that we feel, is just out of humanity. We are supporting these people. The Jewish were displaced, millions of them. We gave them home. People across Africa, where women are raped in Congo and Sudan, South Sudan. Yemen is completely in rubble. We are just showing moral leadership across the world and giving these people a second chance again, once more. We are indebted, some we are just showing that global leadership, that moral leadership in the world. It does not exist anywhere in the world. About 145,000 approximately people are resettled across the world. America resettles almost 80% of these people, and that is just something to comment ourselves with. Now people are here, they cannot reunite with their families. Trauma is extremely added to their experience, and then people who actually had family members coming next week, it's cancelled.
When we come back, I want to ask our guests what they say to those of you who voted for Donald Trump, who say, well, this is what we voted for, and this is what we want. Stay with us. So, Donald Trump won. He got a lot of votes in Rhode Island. Of course, he didn't win Rhode Island or Massachusetts, but there's an active constituency out there who believes that this is what they voted for, this is what they want. Your message to everyday citizens about that is what?
Well, the majority of people, the popular vote, he lost. And it was the Electoral College, which is a small minority compared to...
We all know that.
Yeah.
He won fair and square. That's the rules.
Okay, that is the rules.
That's the rules.
Yeah.
But just it doesn't matter. I don't want to diminish your thought, Imam. I just want to. I want you to speak to. Listen, you and I did what 3, 4, or 5 shows prior to the election as we were warming up to the Muslim this, the Muslim that, and the Muslim this, right? So, hey, we've got him. He's here. He's the President of the United States. But I think there's a lot of humanness that's actually starting to seep through or now blow through this particular latest move that he's made. I don't know whether it's shaking the way people are thinking about it or not. Are you guys so immersed in your own communities, so upset and worried that you're not seeing the electorate out there that put him in? And
well, I myself, he talks about let's make America great again. Well, there's always been 2 Americas, and he seems to be talking coded language, and that's the dangerous
and the
part.
2 Americas are what and what?
The white America and black America. That can't diminish the fact that that's a reality.
Does that relate to this?
It relates to that. He is selecting the Bannons. Where is he going? Where's he? The mindset. It seems to he's going to turn the clock back. What's next? You're going to or diminish the civil the progress.
So that's your historic, tremendous story that people need to read. Much fresher look about America.
Talking directly to Trump, the chance to say thank you, because I had known, and I'm thinking every day, because it's not have a choice. We are just giving people. There are 65 million people. 100,000 got brought into. I'm just asking for American citizen for 5 years now. My kids were born in my language, so this is all they have. So if people love this country more than me, we are all. But it's not about us and. It is the moment we have that divide of us. You don't love this country more than any other person. To protect it, and that is why they are involved in any terrorist attack in this country.
To see what hear what he's saying. When people and is America has this.
There you go. There's your message for tonight. To be continued every day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So we haven't forgotten the Patriots are getting ready for a big game. By the way, you can't say Super Bowl. Have you noticed how many people can't say Super Bowl? The darn thing is so copyrighted, nobody can promote the Super Bowl. Well, this is not a commercial discussion. Super Bowl. Am I in trouble now?
Yes.
Oh. Well, it's called this. I'm out of time. I gotta go.